In the depths of the Alaskan wilderness, where untamed nature meets human determination, an extraordinary tale of compassion and gratitude would unfold, spanning years and defying the boundaries between man and beast. No one could have predicted that a chance encounter with a trapped bear cub would lead to a reunion that would challenge everything we thought we knew about the bonds between humans and wild animals. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crisp mountain air bit at Marcus Thompson's weathered face as he trudged through the pristine snow-covered valley of the Denali wilderness. The early morning sun barely pierced through the dense canopy of towering spruce trees, casting ethereal shadows across the untouched powder beneath his boots. As a veteran wildlife photographer, who had spent 2 decades documenting the raw beauty of Alaska's most remote regions, Marcus knew every creak, rustle, and whisper of these ancient woods. The late autumn chill had settled deep into the landscape, painting the remaining leaves in brilliant shades of amber and crimson. It was Marcus's favorite time of year, when most tourists had retreated south, leaving him alone with his camera, to capture the wilderness, preparing for winter's embrace. His breath formed delicate clouds in the frigid air as he adjusted his heavy camera equipment, carefully picking his way through a maze of frost-covered rocks and fallen branches. The familiar weight of his backpack pressed against his shoulders, filled with survival gear that had become second nature after years of solitary expeditions. His trusted Canon EOS 1DX Mark III hung ready at his chest, its lens protected from the occasional snowflake that drifted down from the swaying branches above. Marcus had learned long ago that the best shots came not from chasing them, but from becoming one with the environment, letting nature's stories unfold before his patient lens. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft crunch of snow beneath his insulated boots and the distant call of a lone raven echoing through the valley. Years of experience had taught him to read these sounds like a language, the warning calls of ground squirrels, the distinctive rustle of moose moving through underbrush, the sharp crack of ice shifting on the nearby lake. But today, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, an unnatural stillness that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Marcus paused, his trained ear catching an unfamiliar sound carried on the bitter wind. At first, it was barely perceptible, a sound that seemed out of place in this pristine wilderness. He stood motionless, his breathing shallow, listening intently as it came again. It wasn't the typical call of any wildlife he knew, nor was it the sound of nature going about its ancient cycles. This was something else entirely, a sound that spoke of desperation and fear. The unexpected noise cut through the morning stillness, like a knife growing clearer with each passing moment. It was a high-pitched whimper, filled with unmistakable distress, coming from somewhere in the thick underbrush ahead. Marcus's heart rate quickened as his mind raced through possibilities. In 2 decades of wildlife photography, he had developed an almost intuitive understanding of animal sounds, but this one carried a note of anguish that made his chest tighten. Carefully setting down his tripod, Marcus pulled out his binoculars, scanning the frost-covered landscape ahead. The dense vegetation and morning mist made visibility challenging, but years of tracking wildlife had honed his senses. The cry came again, stronger this time, guiding him toward its source. With measured steps, he began moving forward, his boots breaking through the thin crust of ice that had formed over the previous night's snowfall. The sound led him off his planned route, away from the well-worn game trails he usually followed. As he pushed through the thick undergrowth, the whimpers grew more distinct, taking on a quality that made his blood run cold. It was young, whatever it was, and it was suffering. Marcus had photographed countless animals in distress over the years, documenting both the harsh realities and profound beauty of wildlife, but something about this cry spoke to his soul on a deeper level. Breaking through a dense thicket of snow-laden bushes, Marcus emerged into a small clearing and froze. There, in the hollow of a massive fallen spruce, was a sight that would forever change the course of his life. A bear cub, no more than a few months old, lay trapped in what appeared to be an illegal snare, its small body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The morning sun caught the tears matting the fur around its eyes, and its pitiful cries echoed through the still air with heart-wrenching clarity. The rage that filled Marcus's chest was immediate and overwhelming. In all his years documenting wildlife, he had developed a deep hatred for poachers and their cruel methods. The snare was clearly illegal. Alaska had strict regulations about trapping, and this crude device showed all the hallmarks of unauthorized hunting. The cub's hind leg was caught in the metal wire, which had tightened with each desperate attempt to escape, cutting into the young bear's flesh. Marcus's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The cub appeared to be a brown bear, likely separated from its mother, a dangerous situation in itself, as the mother could be nearby and would defend her offspring with lethal force if she appeared. Yet, as he scanned the surrounding area, he saw no signs of an adult bear. The snow around the trap was disturbed only by the cub's struggles, suggesting it had been alone for some time. The morning light strengthened, illuminating the clearing and revealing more details of the cub's dire situation. Its dark eyes, filled with terror and exhaustion, locked onto Marcus as he carefully moved closer. Despite its fear, the cub's gaze held an intelligence that struck him deeply. There was awareness there, a consciousness that seemed to plead for help. The wire had drawn blood where it bit into the cub's leg, staining the snow beneath it, a haunting crimson. Drawing on years of experience with wildlife, Marcus knew he had to act quickly but cautiously. The cub was clearly weakening, its cries growing softer, its struggles less frequent. The morning temperature was well below freezing, and hypothermia would soon become a serious concern, if it wasn't already. Yet helping a wild animal, especially a bear, carried significant risks. One wrong move could result in serious injury, even if the cub was young and weakened. Setting down his camera equipment, Marcus slowly removed his heavy winter coat, his breath visible in the frigid air. The coat would serve two purposes: protection from the cub's claws and teeth if it panicked, and a way to calm the animal by blocking its vision. He had assisted injured wildlife before, though never something as potentially dangerous as a bear cub. Every instinct honed through years in the wilderness screamed at him to be careful, to think this through. The cub watched his every move, its small body trembling with a mixture of cold, fear, and exhaustion. Its pitiful whimpers had grown weaker, but its eyes remained fixed on Marcus, displaying an almost human-like awareness that made his heart ache. The snare had been set with cruel efficiency, designed to hold its prey until death or the return of the poacher. The thought of someone deliberately causing such suffering filled Marcus with a cold fury that burned hotter than the bitter Alaskan wind. Time was critical now. The cub's weakening condition meant he needed to act soon, but rushing could prove fatal for either of them. Marcus began talking softly, his voice calm and steady, hoping to accustom the young bear to his presence. He had learned over the years that many animals responded to the tone of human voices, even if they couldn't understand the words. The cub's ears twitched at the sound, but it didn't show signs of increased agitation. As he inched closer, Marcus could see the full extent of the cub's condition. Its fur was matted with ice and snow, and its breathing was labored. The trap had been set along what appeared to be a game trail, suggesting the poachers knew the area well. The thought that they might return at any moment added urgency to an already tense situation. The morning was advancing, and with it, the possibility of an unwelcome encounter with either the poachers or the cub's mother, if she was still alive. With careful movements, Marcus retrieved his multi-tool from his pocket, keeping his voice low and soothing as he prepared for what would be the most dangerous part of the rescue. The cub would need to remain still while he worked on the snare, and any sudden movement could result in disaster. The bitter wind whipped through the clearing, carrying with it the promise of more snow, adding another layer of urgency to his task. Marcus's heart pounded as he carefully approached the trapped cub, his experienced eyes scanning every detail of the situation. The metal snare had bitten deep into the young bear's flesh, and the signs of its desperate struggle were evident in the blood-stained snow and torn earth around it. Pulling his thick winter gloves tighter, he began to slowly unzip his heavy coat, never taking his eyes off the frightened animal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cub's dark eyes followed his movements, its small body trembling with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Years of wildlife photography had taught Marcus to read animal behavior, and he could see the moment when the cub's terror began to shift into something else. A glimmer of understanding, perhaps, or simply the resignation of complete exhaustion. Either way, it was now or never. With practiced precision, Marcus spread his coat wide, creating a makeshift barrier between himself and the cub. The thick material would protect him from claws and teeth if the animal panicked, but more importantly, it would help shield the cub's vision, potentially keeping it calmer during the delicate rescue attempt. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying with it the first flakes of fresh snow. Drawing his multi-tool from his pocket, Marcus began speaking in low, soothing tones. "Easy there, little one," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the whisper of wind through the branches. "I know you're scared, but I'm going to help you." The cub's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, but it remained still, its eyes never leaving his face. The snare was cruel in its simplicity, a loop of steel cable designed to tighten with every movement of its victim. Marcus had seen similar traps before, documented their devastating impact on wildlife for conservation groups. But knowing how they worked and dismantling one while a live bear watched were two very different things. The metal wire had frozen in the bitter cold, making it even more challenging to manipulate. Time seemed to slow as Marcus worked, his fingers growing numb despite his insulated gloves. The cub let out occasional whimpers, but remained surprisingly still, as if understanding that this strange human was its only hope for survival. Each breath created a small cloud in the frigid air, mixing with the increasingly heavy snowfall that now dusted both man and bear. With painstaking care, Marcus began to work the wire cutters into position. The angle was awkward, and one wrong move could either spook the cub or drive the wire deeper into its flesh. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cold freezing almost instantly in the bitter wind. The cub watched him with those impossibly intelligent eyes, its breath coming in shallow pants. "Almost there," Marcus whispered, more to himself than the bear. The wire cutters found their mark, and he began to apply pressure. The metal was thick, designed to hold much larger prey, and the frozen temperature made it even more resistant. For a heart-stopping moment, Marcus thought the tool might not be strong enough to cut through. Then, with a sudden snap that seemed to echo through the clearing, the wire gave way. The cub let out a startled yelp, jerking its injured leg instinctively. Marcus fell backward into the snow, his heart racing as he watched the young bear process its newfound freedom. For a moment, neither moved, both frozen in a tableau of uncertainty. The cub tried to stand, stumbling on its injured leg. Without thinking, Marcus reached out, steadying the small creature with a gentle hand on its side. To his amazement, the cub didn't flinch or try to bite. It simply leaned into his touch for a brief moment, finding its balance. The connection lasted only seconds, but it felt profound, almost spiritual. Looking closer at the injury, Marcus could see that while the wire had cut into the flesh, it hadn't severed any major blood vessels or tendons. With proper rest and care from its mother, the cub would likely make a full recovery. The thought of the mother bear brought Marcus back to reality. He needed to get out of there before she returned, if she was still alive. Carefully backing away, Marcus watched as the cub took its first tentative steps of freedom. Despite the pain it must have been feeling, the young bear moved with growing confidence, testing its injured leg. The snow was falling more heavily, now, already beginning to cover the tracks and blood that marked the site of the rescue. The cub paused at the edge of the clearing, turning to look back at Marcus. In that moment, something passed between them, a connection that transcended the natural barriers between human and wild animal. The cub's eyes held a depth of awareness that Marcus had never seen before in his decades of wildlife photography. Then, with a final glance, it disappeared into the underbrush, leaving Marcus alone with the broken snare and his thoughts. Collecting his gear with shaking hands, Marcus felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Relief at the successful rescue, anger at the poachers who had set the trap, and something else, a sense that he had just been part of something extraordinary. The encounter had lasted less than an hour, but he knew it would stay with him forever. As he made his way back to his original trail, Marcus pulled out his camera. Though he hadn't taken any photos of the rescue itself, being too focused on helping the cub, he carefully documented the illegal snare and its location. This evidence would be valuable to the local wildlife authorities, perhaps helping prevent future animals from suffering the same fate. The snow was falling in earnest now, thick flakes swirling in the strengthening wind. Marcus knew he should head back to his cabin, but something made him pause. Taking out his GPS, he marked the exact location of the rescue. Something told him this spot would be significant, though he couldn't have explained why. Over the next few days, Marcus found his thoughts returning constantly to the young bear. He filed reports with the wildlife authorities about the illegal trap, provided them with photographs and coordinates, and spent hours scanning his reference books about bear behavior. The intelligence he had seen in those dark eyes haunted him, making him question everything he thought he knew about wild animals. Spring turned to summer, and summer to fall. Marcus continued his work, photographing the wild beauty of Alaska's wilderness, but he never forgot about the cub. Sometimes, when tracking other bears for his photos, he would look for signs of a young brown bear with a scarred hind leg, but the vastness of the wilderness made finding one specific animal nearly impossible. Years passed, and the memory of that snowy morning became just that, a memory, albeit one that Marcus treasured. He had helped countless other injured animals since then, always approaching them with the same patience and compassion he had shown the bear cub. His photography had gained recognition in wildlife conservation circles, and his documentation of illegal trapping had helped lead to increased enforcement in the area. Life continued its steady rhythm, marked by the changing of seasons and the eternal cycles of the Alaskan wilderness. Marcus grew older, his hair graying at the temples, but his passion for wildlife photography never dimmed. He had seen countless extraordinary things through his lens: wolves hunting in the midnight sun, moose calves taking their first steps, eagles soaring through mountain passes. But nothing quite matched the connection he had felt with that trapped bear cub. Then, one crisp autumn morning, almost exactly 5 years after the rescue, everything changed. Marcus was setting up his camera near a small stream, hoping to photograph salmon making their way upstream. The early morning light was perfect, painting the landscape in soft golden hues. He was so focused on adjusting his settings that he almost missed the sound, a soft rustling in the underbrush behind him. Years of wilderness experience had taught Marcus to trust his instincts. Something was watching him, something large. Slowly, carefully, he turned around, his hand instinctively reaching for the bear spray on his belt. What he saw made him freeze, his hand dropping away from the spray as recognition and disbelief flooded through him. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a magnificent brown bear. It was young, probably around 5 or 6 years old, with a distinctive scar visible on its hind leg. The bear stood perfectly still, its intelligent eyes fixed on Marcus, with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through to his soul. In that moment he knew this was the cub he had saved, now grown into a powerful adult. The encounter defied everything Marcus thought he knew about wild animals, about the boundaries between human and beast. The bear made no aggressive moves, showed no signs of fear or anger. Instead, it simply watched him, its gaze holding a depth of awareness that sent chills down Marcus's spine. The morning light caught its fur, turning it to burnished gold, as both man and bear remained frozen in a moment that seemed to exist outside of time. Marcus stood transfixed, barely breathing, as the massive brown bear continued to study him with those haunting, intelligent eyes. The morning light filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows across the bear's muscular frame. The scar on its hind leg, the unmistakable mark from the snare he had removed years ago, was clearly visible, a permanent reminder of their first encounter. Time seemed to stand still in the clearing as Marcus's mind raced through everything he knew about bear behavior. This was completely unprecedented. Brown bears were typically solitary creatures, avoiding human contact unless threatened or protecting their territory. Yet this bear's behavior defied all natural instincts. There was no aggression, no defensive posturing, just that steady, almost contemplative gaze. Slowly, with deliberate movements that spoke of purpose rather than threat, the bear took a step forward. Marcus remained still, his years of wildlife experience warring with the extraordinary nature of this encounter. Every instinct told him to back away, to make himself large, to reach for his bear spray. But something deeper, something that transcended traditional wildlife training, kept him rooted to the spot. The bear moved with a fluid grace that belied its enormous size, each step measured and precise. Its muscles rippled beneath its thick fur, a testament to the powerful predator it had become. Yet there was something else in its movement, a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a magnificent creature. The scar on its leg had healed well, though the fur had grown back slightly darker, creating a distinctive marking that caught the morning light. As the distance between them decreased, Marcus could hear the bear's steady breathing, could see the intelligence burning in its dark eyes. The same awareness he had witnessed in the scared cub years ago had matured into something even more remarkable. The bear stopped about 20 feet away, close enough for Marcus to see the individual hairs of its coat stirring in the gentle breeze. Then, to Marcus's utter amazement, the bear slowly lowered itself to a sitting position, its movements deliberate and calm. It was a posture that left it vulnerable, something bears simply didn't do in the presence of humans. The message was clear. This was not a threat display or a chance encounter. This was something else entirely. Marcus's hand trembled as he reached for his camera, moving with exaggerated slowness to avoid startling the bear. To his surprise, the animal showed no reaction to the movement, maintaining its seated position with almost regal patience. Through his viewfinder, Marcus could see every detail of the magnificent creature, the way the morning light caught its fur, the subtle expressions crossing its face, the depth of awareness in its eyes. As he captured this extraordinary moment, Marcus noticed something even more unusual. The bear was actively watching him work, its head tilting slightly as the camera clicked, showing an almost human-like curiosity about the process. It was behavior he had never seen before in any wild animal, let alone a brown bear. Lowering his camera, Marcus spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I'd see you again, little one, though I suppose you're not so little anymore." The bear's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, and for a moment Marcus could have sworn he saw recognition flash in those intelligent eyes. The bear shifted its weight, and Marcus noticed something in its body language that made his breath catch. The animal was deliberately exposing its scarred leg, almost as if showing him how well it had healed. It was a gesture that seemed impossible, yet there it was, happening right before his eyes. Suddenly, the bear's head snapped up, its attention caught by something in the distance that Marcus couldn't perceive. With the same deliberate grace it had shown throughout their encounter, the bear rose to its feet. For a moment, it stood at its full height, a magnificent testament to the power and beauty of the wild. Then, to Marcus's continued amazement, the bear did something that would forever change his understanding of wildlife. It moved to a nearby berry bush, one heavy with late-season fruit, and with surprising gentleness used its massive paws to pull down a branch. Several ripe berries fell to the ground, and the bear stepped back, looking at Marcus expectantly. It took several seconds for Marcus to understand what was happening. The bear wasn't gathering food for itself, it was showing him where to find it. In all his years of wildlife photography, in all the research he had read about bear behavior, nothing like this had ever been documented. With slow, careful movements, Marcus approached the fallen berries. The bear watched calmly, making no aggressive moves, simply observing as he collected a few of the bright red fruits. They were bog cranberries, a late-season variety that was both nutritious and rare. Finding such a productive bush was valuable knowledge for anyone spending time in the wilderness. As Marcus straightened up, the bear made a soft huffing sound, not a growl, but something almost conversational. Then, with one final look that seemed to carry the weight of years, it turned and began to move away. Its powerful muscles rippled. As it walked, its movements both graceful and purposeful. At the edge of the clearing, the bear paused, looking back one last time. In that moment, Marcus felt a profound connection that transcended the natural order of things. This wasn't just a chance encounter between a photographer and his subject. It was a reunion between two beings who had shared something extraordinary. The bear disappeared into the underbrush, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and his camera full of impossible images. He stood there for a long time, processing what had just happened. The encounter defied everything he thought he knew about wildlife behavior, about the boundaries between humans and animals. Over the next few weeks, Marcus carefully reviewed his photos of the encounter. Each image told part of the story. The bear's initial appearance, its careful approach, the deliberate showing of its healed leg, the remarkable berry-sharing behavior. He consulted with wildlife biologists and bear experts, sharing his documentation of the encounter. The scientific community was skeptical at first, but the photographic evidence was compelling. The bear's behavior showed a level of intelligence and memory that challenged existing understanding of wildlife cognition. The fact that it had not only recognized Marcus, but had chosen to interact with him in such a deliberate way, sparked intense discussion in wildlife research circles. Marcus began to spend more time in that area, hoping for another encounter. Sometimes he would find signs that the bear had been nearby, distinctive paw prints marking on trees or freshly discovered berry patches that seemed to have been deliberately exposed. It was as if the bear was leaving him messages, continuing their unlikely connection in its own way. The experience changed Marcus's approach to wildlife photography. While he had always respected the animals he photographed, this encounter gave him a deeper appreciation for their intelligence and emotional capacity. His work began to focus more on capturing the personality and awareness in his subjects, leading to a series of award-winning photographs that showed wildlife in a new light. He started giving lectures about his experience, sharing the story of the bear cub he had saved and its remarkable return years later. While some remained skeptical, his passion and the evidence he presented inspired others to look at wildlife differently. His talks emphasized the importance of compassion in conservation, arguing that understanding and protecting wildlife required recognizing their capacity for intelligence and emotional complexity. The story spread beyond scientific circles, capturing the public's imagination. It spoke to something fundamental about the relationship between humans and wildlife, suggesting that acts of kindness could create bonds that transcended species barriers. Marcus's experience became a powerful argument for wildlife conservation, demonstrating that animals were capable of far more sophisticated behavior than many had believed. Years continued to pass, and while Marcus never had another encounter, quite like that one, he occasionally found signs that his bear was still out there. Sometimes, during his photography expeditions, he would discover freshly exposed berry patches or easy paths through difficult terrain, as if someone was helping guide his way. Each sign reminded him of that extraordinary morning and the profound connection he had shared with a creature many would consider merely wild. The encounter had taught him something vital about the nature of compassion and its power to create lasting bonds. That single act of kindness, saving a trapped bear cub on a cold winter morning, had rippled out through time, returning to him in ways he could never have imagined. It was a reminder that every action, every choice to help another living being, could have far-reaching consequences that extended far beyond the moment. The story of Marcus and the bear began to take on a life of its own, spreading through conservation circles and inspiring a new generation of wildlife photographers and researchers. One crisp autumn morning, almost a year after their remarkable reunion, Marcus found himself leading a small group of wildlife photography students through the Alaskan wilderness, sharing his expertise and the valuable lessons he had learned over the decades. As they moved through the forest, Marcus noticed subtle signs that seemed familiar: broken branches at just the right height, exposed berry patches, and clear paths through typically dense undergrowth. His heart quickened as he recognized these marks, but he kept his observations to himself, not wanting to raise false hopes among his students. The group paused in a small clearing to photograph a family of foxes playing near their den. The morning light was perfect, casting long shadows across the frost-covered ground. Marcus was helping a student adjust her camera settings when a sudden hush fell over the group. Looking up, he saw what had caught their attention. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood his bear. The massive brown bear's presence commanded immediate respect, its powerful frame highlighted by the golden morning light. The students instinctively moved closer to Marcus, their cameras forgotten in the face of such an impressive predator. But Marcus remained calm, recognizing the gentle awareness in those familiar eyes. To everyone's amazement, the bear slowly approached, maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly showing no aggression. The scar on its hind leg was visible, and Marcus quietly explained to his awestruck students the story of their first encounter. The bear sat down, displaying the same remarkable behavior it had shown during their reunion, seeming to understand that it was now part of a teaching moment. One of the students, a young woman named Sarah, who had been skeptical of Marcus's previous stories about intelligent wildlife, watched in wonder as the bear calmly observed their group. "I never believed animals could be capable of this level of understanding," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "This changes everything we thought we knew about wildlife behavior." The bear's presence that day transformed the photography workshop into something far more significant. It became a profound lesson about the complexity of wildlife intelligence and the unexpected bonds that could form between species. The students witnessed firsthand how compassion could bridge the gap between humans and wild animals, creating connections that defied conventional understanding. As the group watched, the bear began to move with purpose, leading them to a series of locations that offered spectacular photography opportunities: a hidden waterfall teeming with salmon, a meadow filled with grazing moose, and a cliff face where eagles had nested. It was as if the bear had become a guide, sharing its intimate knowledge of the wilderness with these human observers. The students captured incredible images that day, but more importantly, they gained a new perspective on wildlife photography and conservation. They learned that the best photographs came not from pursuing or disturbing animals, but from establishing a respectful presence and allowing the natural world to reveal itself. Marcus observed with pride as his students began to understand the deeper aspects of wildlife photography: the patience required, the respect needed, and the profound connections that could form when humans approached the wilderness with open hearts and minds. The bear's presence had turned a simple workshop into a life-changing experience for everyone involved. As the day drew to a close, the bear led them to one final location, a high ridge overlooking the valley below. The view was breathtaking, offering a panoramic perspective of the wilderness they had explored. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, creating a perfect backdrop for their final photographs. Before departing, the bear did something extraordinary. It approached Marcus and each of the students in turn, maintaining a safe distance but making eye contact with each person. The message was clear. This had been a deliberate sharing of knowledge, a bridge between the wild and human worlds that none of them would ever forget. The bear's behavior that day sparked a series of new research initiatives focused on understanding wildlife intelligence and emotional capacity. Sarah, the once skeptical student, went on to become a leading researcher in the field of animal cognition, her work inspired by what she had witnessed in that Alaskan forest. Marcus's photography workshop became legendary in wildlife photography. Circles with aspiring photographers from around the world hoping to experience something similar. While the bear didn't appear at every workshop, its influence was felt in the way Marcus taught his students to approach wildlife photography with patience, respect, and an openness to the extraordinary. The story of Marcus and the bear began, appearing in scientific journals and conservation publications, challenging traditional views about wildlife behavior and intelligence. Researchers studied the photos and videos taken that day, analyzing every aspect of the bear's remarkable behavior. The evidence suggested levels of cognitive ability and emotional intelligence that had never been documented in wild animals before. Conservation efforts in the area received unprecedented support as people were moved by the story of the rescued cub that returned years later to express what appeared to be gratitude and trust. Local authorities strengthened their anti-poaching measures, and the number of illegal traps found in the region dropped significantly. Marcus continued his work, his photography now infused with a deeper understanding of the connections possible between humans and wildlife. His images captured not just the physical beauty of animals, but also hints of their intelligence, personality, and emotional depth. His work became a powerful tool for conservation, helping people see wildlife as beings capable of complex thoughts and feelings. The bear's influence extended beyond that single day, creating ripples that affected wildlife photography and conservation for years to come. Students who had witnessed its remarkable behavior went on to become influential voices in their own right, sharing the lessons they had learned about respect, patience, and the unexpected ways that compassion could be returned. Years later, Marcus would often return to that ridge where they had shared their final moments with the bear. Sometimes he would find fresh signs that his old friend had passed through recently, distinctive paw prints, marked trees, or newly exposed berry patches. These subtle messages reminded him that the connection they shared continued, even when they weren't in each other's presence. The experience had taught them all that the natural world was full of mysteries and possibilities that went beyond human understanding. It showed that acts of kindness, even those as simple as helping an injured animal, could create bonds that transcended species barriers and transformed lives in unexpected ways. The story of Marcus and the bear became more than just a tale of an unusual animal encounter. It became a symbol of hope, showing that despite the often harsh realities of the natural world, there was room for understanding and connection between species. It reminded people that every act of compassion, no matter how small, had the potential to create lasting positive change in the world. Marcus's legacy grew beyond his impressive portfolio of wildlife photographs. He became known as someone who had helped bridge the gap between humans and wildlife, showing that with patience, respect and compassion, extraordinary connections were possible. His experience with the bear inspired a new approach to wildlife photography and conservation, one that emphasized the importance of recognizing and respecting the intelligence and emotional capacity of wild animals. The bear's behavior had challenged scientific understanding of wildlife intelligence, leading to new research and discoveries about animal cognition. What had started as a simple act of kindness, saving a trapped bear cub, had grown into something that transformed how people viewed and interacted with the natural world. As Marcus's story spread, it attracted the attention of Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned expert in animal cognition from the University of Washington. She reached out to Marcus, proposing a groundbreaking study that would combine his unique relationship with the bear and modern scientific methods to better understand wildlife intelligence. One crisp morning, Marcus found himself leading Dr. Rodriguez and her research team through the familiar trails of the Alaskan wilderness. They carried state-of-the-art equipment, cameras with infrared capabilities, sound recording devices, and various sensors designed to capture every aspect of potential wildlife interactions. Dr. Rodriguez had designed a series of non-invasive experiments that could help measure the bear's cognitive abilities if they encountered it. The excitement among the research team was palpable. Most of them had spent their careers studying animal behavior in controlled environments. But this was different. This was an opportunity to observe something unprecedented. A wild bear that had demonstrated remarkable intelligence and apparent emotional memory. As they hiked deeper into the forest, Marcus noticed the familiar signs, subtle markers that suggested his ursine friend was nearby. Fresh claw marks on trees, deliberately exposed berry patches, and clear paths through the undergrowth. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented everything, amazed by the apparent purposefulness of these marks. Suddenly, a young researcher named Michael spotted something unusual, a series of stones arranged in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern. The formation pointed toward a hidden valley that Marcus had never explored before. The research team was buzzing with excitement. Tool use and environmental manipulation were considered signs of advanced intelligence. Following the stone markers, they entered a pristine valley that took their breath away. A crystal-clear stream wound through meadows dotted with late-season wildflowers, and the surrounding cliffs provided natural shelter from harsh winds. It was a perfect wildlife habitat, rich with food sources and natural protection. Then they saw it, not just Marcus's bear, but an entire scene that left even the experienced researchers speechless. The bear was sitting calmly near the stream, and around it, at respectful distances, were other animals. A small herd of moose, several foxes, and even a pair of wolves, all coexisting peacefully in this hidden sanctuary. Dr. Rodriguez whispered, in amazement, "This is unprecedented. These species would normally avoid each other. The bear appears to be maintaining peace, acting as some kind of mediator." Her hands trembled as she documented the scene, her scientific skepticism warring with the extraordinary evidence before her eyes. The bear noticed their arrival, but showed no alarm. Instead, it rose slowly and began to demonstrate something remarkable. It showed them how it had created small dams in the stream, creating pools where fish could gather more easily. The research team watched in stunned silence as the bear revealed sophisticated problem-solving abilities previously undocumented in wild animals. Over the next several hours, they witnessed behavior that would revolutionize our understanding of wildlife intelligence. The bear demonstrated not only tool use, but also what appeared to be teaching behavior, showing younger animals how to find food efficiently and safely. It had created a peaceful coexistence in this valley that defied natural instincts. Michael, the young researcher who had spotted the stone markers, was particularly moved. "This changes everything we thought we knew about wildlife behavior," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just about survival. This is about community, about creating something better for all species." As they continued their observations, Dr. Rodriguez's team documented numerous examples of sophisticated behavior. The bear had apparently learned to predict weather patterns, creating sheltered areas that other animals could use during storms. It had developed methods of marking safe drinking spots and warning of dangerous areas. The most remarkable moment came when they witnessed the bear actively mediating a potential conflict between two moose. It positioned itself between the aggressive animals, using body language and soft vocalizations to calm the situation. The behavior demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence and social awareness that was previously unthinkable in wild animals. Marcus watched with pride as his bear friend demonstrated abilities that went far beyond what he had initially observed. This wasn't just about remembering a past kindness. This was about taking that experience and using it to create positive change in its environment. Dr. Rodriguez's research would later reveal that the bear had essentially created a micro-ecosystem where different species could coexist safely. It had taken the concept of cooperation it had learned from its interaction with Marcus and applied it on a larger scale, teaching other animals that peaceful coexistence was possible. The implications of their discoveries were enormous. The bear had demonstrated not only advanced cognitive abilities, but also emotional intelligence, social awareness, and even what appeared to be a sense of responsibility toward other species. It had created a model of cooperation that challenged everything we thought we knew about wildlife behavior. As the day drew to a close, the bear approached the research team, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly communicating its acceptance of their presence. Dr. Rodriguez was moved to tears as she observed the intelligent awareness in its eyes. "This isn't just about animal behavior anymore," she said. "This is about the potential for positive change that exists in all living beings." The Bears Valley became a protected research site, carefully monitored to prevent any disruption to the remarkable ecosystem it had created. The research team's findings sparked a revolution in our understanding of wildlife intelligence and emotional capacity. Marcus's simple act of compassion years ago had set in motion a chain of events that transformed our relationship with the natural world. The bear had taken that single moment of kindness and multiplied it, creating a model of cooperation and peaceful coexistence that offered hope for the future of wildlife conservation. The story spread beyond scientific circles, capturing the public's imagination and inspiring a new generation of conservationists. It showed that when humans approached the natural world with compassion and respect, extraordinary things were possible. The bear had become a symbol of hope, demonstrating that positive change could start with a single act of kindness and grow into something that benefited entire ecosystems. Dr. Rodriguez's research papers on the bear's behavior were published in prestigious scientific journals, challenging traditional views about wildlife intelligence and social behavior. The evidence was undeniable. Animals were capable of far more sophisticated thinking and emotional awareness than previously believed. The discovery led to major changes in wildlife conservation policies. Protected areas were established with a new understanding of how different species could coexist peacefully when given the right environment and examples. The Bear's Valley became a model for wildlife sanctuaries around the world. Marcus continued his photography, but now with a deeper purpose. His images captured not just the physical beauty of wildlife, but also the intelligence, emotional depth, and potential for cooperation that existed in the natural world. His work helped people see animals as thinking, feeling beings capable of extraordinary achievements. The bear's influence continued to grow, its example inspiring new approaches to wildlife conservation and research. It had shown that intelligence, compassion, and cooperation weren't uniquely human traits. They were natural forces that could transform entire ecosystems when given the chance to flourish. Years later, Marcus would often visit the valley, with new groups of researchers and conservationists sharing the remarkable story of how a single act of kindness had grown into something that changed our understanding of the natural world. The bear's legacy lived on, a powerful reminder that every positive action, no matter how small, had the potential to create lasting change. The impact of Marcus and the bear's story reached far beyond scientific research and conservation circles. One morning, as Marcus reviewed his emails at his cabin, he received an unexpected message from Sarah Chen, an elementary school teacher from Seattle. She had been using his photographs and story to teach her students about wildlife conservation, and the results had been extraordinary. Sarah's students, inspired by the tale of compassion and connection between a photographer and a bear, had started their own wildlife protection initiative. They had organized fundraisers, written letters to local politicians, and even created a children's book about the importance of helping animals in need. Their enthusiasm had spread to other schools, creating a movement of young conservationists determined to make a difference. Moved by their dedication, Marcus agreed to visit Sarah's class. Walking into the classroom, he was overwhelmed by the sight of walls covered with children's artwork depicting his bear and other wildlife. The students' eyes lit up as he shared more details about his experiences, showing them never-before-seen photographs of the Bear's Valley. One student, a quiet girl named Maya, raised her hand and asked a question that touched Marcus deeply. "Do you think the bear teaches other bears to be kind too?" The question revealed an understanding of the ripple effect of compassion that many adults struggled to grasp. Marcus explained how the bear's behavior had indeed influenced other animals, creating a chain reaction of positive change. The children's genuine interest and empathy inspired Marcus to develop an educational program that would bring his experience to schools across the country. Working with Sarah and other educators, he created a curriculum that used his story to teach children about wildlife conservation, emotional intelligence, and the importance of kindness. The program quickly gained attention from educational institutions worldwide. Stories began pouring in of children taking initiative in their own communities, organizing cleanups of wildlife habitats, creating sanctuaries for local animals, and standing up against actions that harmed the environment. The bear's story had awakened something powerful in their young minds. Meanwhile, back in Alaska, Dr. Rodriguez's research team made another groundbreaking discovery. They found evidence that the bear's innovative behaviors were being adopted by other bears in the region. Young cubs were learning to use tools, create shelters, and even demonstrate peaceful interaction with other species. The bear had become not just a practitioner of cooperation, but a teacher. This revelation led to the establishment of the Wildlife Intelligence and Cooperation Institute, WICI, a research center dedicated to studying and promoting peaceful coexistence between species. The institute, built near the Bears Valley with minimal environmental impact, became a gathering place for scientists, conservationists, and educators from around the world. Marcus found himself dividing his time between photography, education, and research. His cabin became a hub for visitors hoping to learn from his experience, from renowned scientists to young students working on school projects. Each visitor left with a deeper understanding of the potential for connection between humans and wildlife. One particularly memorable visitor was Dr. James Running Wolf, a Native American elder and wildlife biologist. After visiting the Bears Valley, he shared ancient stories from his tribe about the spiritual connections between humans and animals. These traditional teachings aligned remarkably well with the scientific observations of the bear's behavior, bridging the gap between ancient wisdom and modern research. The bear continued to surprise everyone with its innovations. It began creating more sophisticated tools, using branches and rocks in ways that demonstrated problem-solving abilities previously thought impossible in non-primate species. More remarkably, it showed evidence of planning for future seasons, creating food caches and shelter improvements that would benefit multiple species. The valley itself evolved into a living laboratory of interspecies cooperation. Researchers documented cases of wolves sharing hunting territories with bears, moose, allowing bears to guide their calves to safe feeding grounds, and various species working together to maintain the valley's delicate ecosystem. The bear had created a model of cooperation that defied traditional understanding of wildlife behavior. Marcus's photography captured these extraordinary moments, creating a visual record of evolution in animal behavior. His images showed wolves and bears sleeping peacefully near each other, different species sharing food sources without conflict, and young animals of various species playing together under the watchful eyes of their parents. The story attracted the attention of world-renowned primatologist Dr. Jane Goodall, who visited the valley to observe the remarkable behavior firsthand. After spending several days watching the bear's interactions with other species, she declared that this discovery could revolutionize our understanding of animal intelligence and emotional capacity. The bear's influence continued to spread in unexpected ways. Artists began creating works inspired by the story. Paintings, sculptures, music, and even dance performances that celebrated the power of compassion and connection. These artistic interpretations helped bring the message to new audiences, transcending language and cultural barriers. Local indigenous communities shared their own stories of human-animal connections, adding depth and historical context to the scientific observations. Their traditional knowledge, combined with modern research, created a more complete understanding of the complex relationships possible between species. The Bears Valley became a model for a new approach to wildlife conservation. Instead of simply protecting areas from human interference, conservationists began creating environments that encouraged positive interactions between species. The results were remarkable: reduced conflict, healthier ecosystems, and thriving wildlife populations. Marcus noticed that the bear seemed to understand the importance of its role. It would often appear when new researchers or visitors arrived, demonstrating its problem-solving abilities and peaceful interactions with other animals. It was as if it knew that sharing its knowledge could help create positive change on a larger scale. Children who had learned about the bear through Marcus's educational program began reporting their own experiences with wildlife. They shared stories of helping injured animals, protecting local habitats, and observing unexpected cooperation between species in their own neighborhoods. The bear's influence had sparked a new generation of wildlife observers and protectors. The scientific community, initially skeptical of such advanced behaviors in a wild animal, had to repeatedly revise their understanding of animal intelligence. The bear demonstrated abilities that challenged existing theories about cognitive development, emotional capacity, and social learning in wildlife. As the years passed, the bear's legacy grew stronger. Its example inspired changes in wildlife management practices, conservation policies, and educational approaches worldwide. What had started as a simple act of kindness, Marcus freeing a trapped bear cub, had grown into a movement that transformed how humans understood and interacted with the natural world. The story became a symbol of hope in a world often dominated by news of environmental destruction and species extinction. It showed that positive change was possible, that compassion could create ripples that affected entire ecosystems, and that the bonds between species could be stronger than anyone had imagined. Marcus continued his work, knowing that every photograph, every presentation, and every moment spent sharing the bear's story contributed to a greater understanding of our connection with the natural world. The bear had taught him, and through him countless others, that the capacity for positive change existed in all living beings. It just needed the right circumstance to flourish. As Marcus's work with the Wildlife Intelligence and Cooperation Institute continued to flourish, he received an urgent call one stormy evening. A massive wildfire was approaching the valley, threatening the delicate ecosystem that the bear had created. The fire, sparked by an unusually dry summer and strong winds, was moving faster than anyone had anticipated. Racing to the research station, Marcus found Dr. Rodriguez and her team already implementing emergency protocols. But what they witnessed next would add another extraordinary chapter to their unprecedented story. The bear, seemingly aware of the impending danger, had already begun organizing an evacuation of the valley. Through the smoke-filled air, they watched in amazement as the bear guided different species to safety, using its knowledge of the terrain to lead them through hidden paths and underground caves. It had begun this process before any human detected the fire's approach, demonstrating an understanding of natural disasters that challenged scientific knowledge. The research team documented as the bear coordinated with other adult animals, particularly wolves and older moose, to ensure younger and weaker animals were protected during the evacuation. It had developed a system of vocalizations and body language that crossed species barriers, allowing for complex communication in crisis. Dr. Rodriguez's voice trembled with emotion as she recorded her observations. The level of organization we're witnessing is unprecedented. This isn't just about survival instinct. This is strategic thinking, leadership, and cooperation across species boundaries. The bear is demonstrating cognitive abilities we never imagined possible in non-human species. Marcus followed the bear's lead, using his knowledge of photography and wildlife behavior to help document and support the evacuation. The bear had created safe routes that avoided the fire's path, using its understanding of wind patterns and terrain to guide the valley's inhabitants to secure locations. Young wolves worked alongside bear cubs to help guide smaller animals. Moose used their strength to clear paths through fallen debris. Even the valley's bird population seemed to participate, with ravens flying ahead to scout safe routes and returning to communicate with the bear through a series of calls. The Institute's team watched in awe as the bear organized temporary shelters in caves and protected grottos, ensuring different species could coexist safely during the crisis. It had apparently prepared these locations in advance, storing food and creating separate spaces for predators and prey species. As the fire approached the valley's edge, Marcus witnessed something that brought tears to his eyes. The bear returned, repeatedly to check for animals that might have been left behind, showing a level of compassion and responsibility that seemed almost human. It wasn't just saving itself, it was ensuring the survival of the entire community it had helped create. The evacuation's success drew attention from fire ecology experts and disaster management specialists. The bear's methods of coordinating across species and preparing safe routes became a model for wildlife protection during natural disasters. Its actions demonstrated that animals could not only survive disasters, but actively help each other through them. Days later, when the fire had passed and the smoke cleared, the bear led the animals back to the valley. The fire had spared most of their sanctuary, thanks to the natural fire breaks and water sources the bear had maintained. The research team was amazed to see how quickly the community reorganized, with different species working together to restore their habitat. The bear's response to the crisis inspired new approaches to wildlife protection during natural disasters. Conservation organizations began studying how animals could help predict and respond to environmental threats. The bear had shown that wildlife wasn't just passive victims of natural disasters. They could be active participants in survival and recovery. Marcus worked with Dr. Rodriguez to document how the bear used its knowledge of the ecosystem to aid in the valley's recovery. It showed other animals which plants would grow back first, where to find clean water, and how to avoid dangerous areas weakened by the fire. Its understanding of ecological recovery surpassed what many experts thought possible. The story of the evacuation spread rapidly through scientific circles and mainstream media. It demonstrated that wildlife intelligence extended beyond individual survival to community protection and disaster response. The bear had shown that animals could develop complex social organizations that transcended species boundaries. A young climate scientist, Dr. Maria Santos, joined the research team to study how the bear's behavior could help prepare for future environmental challenges. She discovered that the bear had created a network of safe zones throughout the region, suggesting it understood the need for long-term disaster preparedness. The bear's actions during the fire crisis became a powerful symbol of hope in the face of environmental challenges. It showed that nature had incredible resilience and adaptability, especially when different species worked together. The story inspired new conservation approaches that emphasize supporting and learning from wildlife's natural adaptive behaviors. Local indigenous leaders visited the valley to share their traditional knowledge about animals' roles in ecosystem protection. Their ancestral wisdom about wildlife's ability to predict and respond to natural disasters aligned perfectly with what the bear had demonstrated, bridging ancient understanding with modern science. Marcus's photographs of the evacuation and recovery became powerful tools for environmental education. They showed young people that the natural world was full of intelligence, compassion, and cooperation. The images inspired a new generation to think differently about wildlife conservation and environmental protection. The Bears Valley became a model for wildlife disaster preparedness. Conservation organizations began creating networks of protected areas and natural evacuation routes, learning from how the bear had prepared its community for crisis. The approach proved successful in protecting wildlife during subsequent natural disasters. The scientific papers documenting the bear's crisis response behavior were published in leading journals, challenging existing theories about wildlife intelligence and social organization. The bear had demonstrated abilities that were thought impossible in non-human species, forcing a reconsideration of how we understand animal cognition. As the valley recovered from the fire, new species began arriving, drawn by the unique community the bear had created. The ecosystem became even more diverse, with the bear teaching newcomers how to integrate into the peaceful coexistence it had established. Each new arrival added to the complexity and resilience of the community. Marcus noticed that the bear seemed to have gained new wisdom from the crisis. It began teaching young animals more actively, sharing its knowledge about fire safety and disaster response. The bear was ensuring that its understanding would be passed on to future generations, creating a lasting legacy of survival and cooperation. The story of the valley's evacuation became a beacon of hope for environmental protection. It showed that even in the face of natural disasters, compassion and cooperation could prevail. The bear had demonstrated that intelligence and adaptability existed throughout the natural world, waiting to be recognized and supported. Years later, Marcus would often reflect on how that single act of kindness, saving a trapped bear cub, had led to such extraordinary developments. The bear had taken that moment of compassion and transformed it into a model of cooperation that protected countless lives during a crisis. It was a powerful reminder that every act of kindness could grow into something far greater than imagined. The story's remarkable impact continued to expand in unexpected ways. One morning, Marcus received an intriguing email from Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a renowned behavioral scientist from Tokyo University. She had been studying the way information spread between animal communities and had made an astonishing discovery: bears from regions hundreds of miles away were beginning to display similar cooperative behaviors. Dr. Tanaka's research suggested that the original bear's innovative social strategies were being transmitted through bear populations across Alaska and even into Canada. Through some unknown method of communication, the knowledge of peaceful coexistence and complex problem-solving was spreading far beyond the original valley. Marcus joined Dr. Tanaka on an expedition to document this phenomenon. They traveled to remote areas where bears had traditionally been known for their solitary nature and territorial behavior. What they found challenged everything known about wildlife adaptation and social learning. In a valley near the Canadian border, they discovered a group of bears that had created their own version of the cooperative community. These bears had modified the original model to suit their local environment, showing not just imitation, but creative adaptation. They had developed unique solutions to local challenges while maintaining the core principle of peaceful coexistence. This isn't just mimicry, Dr. Tanaka explained, as they observed a young bear teaching wolf cubs how to fish efficiently. These bears are taking the basic concept of cooperation and evolving it. They're showing signs of cultural transmission that we've never seen before in non-primate species. The implications were staggering. What had started as one bear's expression of gratitude had evolved into a cultural revolution in the animal kingdom. Bears, traditionally seen as solitary and territorial, were developing complex social structures and passing knowledge between communities. Marcus's original bear, now recognized as the pioneer of this behavioral revolution, continued to innovate. It began creating more sophisticated communication systems using combinations of vocalizations, gestures, and environmental markers to convey complex messages across species barriers. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented how the bear had developed a system of symbolic communication using natural materials. It would arrange stones, branches, and other objects in specific patterns to convey messages about food sources, dangerous areas, or weather changes. Other animals learned to read and respond to these signs, creating a primitive but effective written language of the wild. The discovery attracted the attention of cognitive scientists worldwide. Dr. Sarah O'Connor, a specialist in animal language from Oxford University, arrived at the valley to study this emerging communication system. Her research revealed that the bears were developing abstract thinking abilities previously thought impossible in non-human species. They're not just communicating immediate needs, Dr. O'Connor explained. They're sharing concepts, teaching, methods, and even expressing complex emotional states. This goes beyond basic survival. They're creating culture. The bear's influence began affecting human communities as well. Indigenous peoples from different regions started sharing stories of similar changes in their local wildlife. Bears were being seen cooperating with other species, creating safe spaces for mixed species groups, and even intervening to prevent conflicts between humans and wildlife. A particularly moving example came from a small village in British Columbia. A young bear, displaying behaviors similar to Marcus's bear, had helped guide a lost child back to safety. The bear had apparently recognized the child's distress, and instead of avoiding human contact, had carefully led the child towards search parties using gentle vocalizations and body language. Marcus traveled to document these stories. His camera, capturing images of bears across North America, showing unprecedented levels of intelligence and empathy. Each location added new evidence that a fundamental shift was occurring in how these animals interacted with their environment and other species. The Bears Valley became a center for studying this evolutionary leap in animal behavior. Researchers, observed as the original bear continued to refine its teaching methods, now working with third-generation animals who had grown up in the cooperative system it had created. Perhaps most remarkably, the bear began showing signs of understanding human conservation efforts. It would guide researchers to areas damaged by human activity, demonstrating how different species work together to restore these spaces. It seemed to recognize that humans could be partners in protecting and preserving the natural world. Dr. Rodriguez established a program to study how this new understanding could be applied to wildlife conservation globally. "What we're seeing here isn't just about bears," she explained. "It's about the potential for all species to evolve beyond traditional behavioral limitations when given the right conditions and examples." The research team documented cases of bears in different regions adapting the cooperative model to help their ecosystems recover from environmental challenges. In areas affected by deforestation, bears were teaching other animals how to find alternative food sources and create new shelters. In regions impacted by climate change, they were showing remarkable adaptability in helping various species survive in changing conditions. Marcus's photographs of these developments became powerful tools for environmental education. They showed bears teaching younger animals how to clean rivers of debris, create natural dams to prevent erosion, and maintain crucial wildlife corridors between fragmented habitats. The story attracted the attention of international conservation organizations. The United Nations Environmental Programme sent representatives to study how this new understanding of animal intelligence could influence global conservation policies. The bear's model of cooperation became a template for wildlife protection programs worldwide. Local communities near the various bear-influenced areas reported significant changes in their relationship with wildlife. Instead of conflicts, they began experiencing peaceful coexistence. The bears seemed to be teaching other animals how to avoid human settlements while still maintaining healthy ecosystems nearby. A group of children from a nearby Alaska native village shared their observations of how the bears were helping maintain traditional berry-picking grounds. The bears had apparently learned to protect these areas, ensuring both humans and wildlife could share the resource sustainably. The scientific community continued to document new developments in bear behavior. The animals were showing increasing sophistication in their problem-solving abilities, tool use, and social organizations. They were even displaying signs of abstract thinking, planning for future seasons, and understanding cause and effect relationships in complex environmental systems. Marcus worked with international media to share these discoveries with the world. The story of how one act of kindness had sparked an evolutionary leap in animal behavior became a symbol of hope for environmental conservation. It showed that positive change was possible, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable environmental challenges. The bear's legacy had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined when Marcus first freed that trapped cub years ago. It had sparked a revolution in how humans understood wildlife intelligence and the potential for cooperation between species. More importantly, it had shown that compassion could create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond the original act of kindness. 10 years after Marcus had first rescued the bear cub, he found himself standing before an international symposium on wildlife intelligence at the Smithsonian Institution. The audience was filled with leading scientists, conservationists, and policymakers from around the world, all gathered to discuss the extraordinary developments that had transformed our understanding of animal cognition. As Marcus shared his latest photographs, a hush fell over the auditorium. The images showed something remarkable. Bears in different parts of the world had begun creating symbolic markers using natural materials, similar to the communication system developed by the original bear, but with unique regional variations. These bears were not just copying behavior, they were innovating and adapting it to their specific environments. Dr. Elena Rodriguez presented groundbreaking research showing how this new bear behavior was influencing entire ecosystems. In areas where bears had adopted cooperative strategies, biodiversity had increased dramatically. Species that had traditionally competed were now sharing resources, and endangered populations were showing signs of recovery. A young marine biologist, Dr. James Chen, approached Marcus after the presentation with an astonishing observation. He had documented similar cooperative behaviors emerging among marine mammals, particularly in areas where they interacted with coastal bear populations. Somehow, the message of cooperation was crossing not just species barriers, but environmental ones as well. The symposium became a turning point in wildlife conservation. Representatives from different countries shared stories of how animals in their regions were displaying unprecedented levels of intelligence and cooperation. A pattern was emerging. The bear's influence had sparked an evolutionary leap in animal behavior that was spreading globally. Marcus's original bear, now in its prime, had developed even more sophisticated methods of teaching and communication. It had created a complex system of mentorship, where experienced animals would guide younger ones in the principles of peaceful coexistence. The research team documented how this knowledge was being passed down through generations, creating a lasting legacy of cooperation. The Bear's Valley had become a living laboratory of animal intelligence. Researchers observed as different species worked together to solve complex problems. Birds would alert larger animals to dangerous weather conditions. Wolves and bears would coordinate hunting to minimize impact on prey populations, and various species would collaborate to maintain the health of their shared habitat. One particularly fascinating development was the emergence of what researchers called peace councils, gatherings where different species would come together to resolve territorial disputes or resource-sharing issues. The bears would often act as mediators in these meetings, using their understanding of different species' needs to help find solutions that benefited everyone. Dr. Rodriguez's team made another groundbreaking discovery. The bears had begun teaching other animals how to help injured or sick members of their communities. They documented cases of bears showing other species how to find medicinal plants, clean wounds, and provide care for injured animals, regardless of species. The story attracted the attention of world leaders concerned about environmental conservation. The United Nations convened a special session to discuss how this new understanding of animal intelligence could influence global environmental policies. Marcus's photographs and research became central to discussions about wildlife protection and habitat preservation. A powerful example of the bear's influence came from a national park in Canada, where rangers observed bears teaching other animals how to adapt to climate change. The bears were showing different species how to find food and shelter as traditional resources became scarce, demonstrating remarkable problem-solving abilities and foresight. The bear's legacy extended into human communities as well. Indigenous peoples from various regions reported that local wildlife had become more cooperative with traditional hunting and gathering practices. Animals would help maintain the health of shared resources, ensuring both human and wildlife populations could thrive together. Marcus worked with educators to develop programs that taught children about the importance of compassion and cooperation in nature. Schools around the world began incorporating lessons from the bear's story into their curricula, inspiring a new generation to think differently about their relationship with the natural world. The scientific community continued to document new developments in animal behavior. Bears were showing signs of understanding complex environmental relationships, demonstrating an awareness of how their actions affected entire ecosystems. They were actively working to restore damaged habitats and maintain the delicate balance of their environments. Dr. Rodriguez established a global network of researchers studying this evolutionary leap in animal behavior. Their findings suggested that animals had far greater capacity for intelligence and cooperation than previously believed. The bear's example had unlocked potential that had always existed in nature, waiting for the right catalyst to emerge. The story became a symbol of hope in environmental conservation. It showed that positive change was possible, that small acts of kindness could trigger transformations that affected entire ecosystems. The bear had demonstrated that intelligence and compassion were not uniquely human traits, but natural forces that could flourish throughout the animal kingdom. Local communities near bear-influenced areas reported significant changes in wildlife behavior. Animals were showing greater tolerance for human presence while maintaining healthy boundaries. The bears had seemingly taught other species how to coexist with humans without compromising their wild nature. Marcus's original bear continued to surprise researchers with its innovations. It had begun teaching younger bears how to use tools more effectively, showing them how to modify natural objects to serve specific purposes. This tool use was becoming more sophisticated with each generation, demonstrating the potential for ongoing evolution in animal intelligence. The bear's influence had created a ripple effect that transformed how humans understood their relationship with nature. It showed that animals were capable of complex thinking, emotional awareness, and sophisticated social organization. More importantly, it demonstrated that cooperation and compassion could create positive change that extended far beyond individual species. As Marcus concluded his presentation at the symposium, he shared a final thought that captured the essence of this extraordinary journey. What began as a simple act of kindness has grown into something that challenges everything we thought we knew about wildlife intelligence and the potential for cooperation in nature. The bear has shown us that when we approach the natural world with compassion and respect, extraordinary things are possible. The symposium marked a new chapter in the ongoing story of how one bear's gratitude had sparked a revolution in animal behavior and human understanding. It was a powerful reminder that positive change often began with small acts of kindness, growing and evolving in ways that could transform entire worlds. 15 years after the initial rescue, Marcus found himself facing an unprecedented situation. Climate change had begun affecting the Alaskan wilderness more severely than anyone had anticipated. Extended droughts, unpredictable weather patterns, and shifting temperatures were creating new challenges for wildlife across the region. However, What happened next would add an even more remarkable chapter to this extraordinary story. The bear, now in its mature years, had begun implementing sophisticated adaptation strategies that left even seasoned researchers amazed. Dr. Rodriguez's team discovered that it was teaching other animals how to create water conservation systems, using natural materials to build rainfall collection points and underground water storage areas that could sustain multiple species during dry periods. One morning, while documenting these innovations, Marcus witnessed something extraordinary. The bear was leading a group of younger animals in what appeared to be a coordinated effort to create natural dams and water channels. Using fallen trees, rocks, and vegetation, they were engineering a complex water management system that would help maintain moisture in the soil and protect vital plant species. Dr. Sarah Williams, a climate adaptation specialist who had joined the research team, was stunned by the sophistication of these efforts. "What we're seeing here goes beyond basic survival instinct," she explained. "These animals are demonstrating an understanding of long-term environmental planning that we previously thought impossible in non-human species." The bear's influence had spread to other regions facing similar challenges. Reports came in from wildlife observers across North America describing how bears were teaching other species to adapt to changing conditions. They were showing animals how to find new food sources, create shelters that could withstand extreme weather, and maintain crucial wildlife corridors as traditional habitats shifted. A particularly moving example emerged from a drought-stricken area in northern Canada. A group of bears, clearly influenced by the original bear's teachings, had created a network of protected springs and streams that provided water for multiple species. They had even developed methods to prevent water sources from freezing during increasingly harsh winters, ensuring year-round access for all animals. Marcus's documentation of these developments attracted the attention of international climate scientists. The bear's adaptive strategies were providing valuable insights into how wildlife could survive and even thrive in the face of climate change. Their solutions were elegantly simple, yet remarkably effective, often working better than human-engineered interventions. The Bears Valley had become a model of climate resilience. The cooperative community it had built was proving more adaptable to environmental changes than traditional wildlife populations. Species that worked together were better able to find solutions to new challenges, sharing resources and knowledge in ways that benefited everyone. Dr. Rodriguez's team made another groundbreaking discovery. The bears were actively working to restore damaged ecosystems. They observed bears teaching other animals how to replant vegetation, prevent soil erosion, and maintain the health of crucial plant species. These efforts were helping to create more resilient ecosystems that could better withstand climate pressures. The story caught the attention of global environmental organizations. The United Nations Environment Programme sent a special team to study how the bears' adaptation strategies could inform human responses to climate change. Their findings suggested that the natural world had much to teach us about sustainable adaptation and cooperative survival. The bears' influence continued to evolve in surprising ways. Younger bears were building upon its original innovations, developing new techniques for environmental protection and restoration. Each generation added its own contributions to the growing body of knowledge, creating an ever-expanding toolkit for survival in a changing world. Local indigenous communities shared their observations of how the bears were helping maintain traditional food sources despite changing conditions. The animals had learned to protect and nurture important plant species, ensuring both wildlife and human communities could continue to rely on these resources. Marcus worked with environmental educators to develop programs teaching children about climate resilience through the bear's example. Schools began incorporating these lessons into their science curricula, helping young people understand the importance of cooperation and adaptation in facing environmental challenges. The scientific community documented how the bear's cooperative approach was helping multiple species survive climate-related challenges. In areas where bears had taught cooperative behaviors, wildlife populations showed greater resilience to environmental stress. Species that might otherwise have struggled were finding new ways to adapt and thrive. Dr. Williams established a research initiative focused on studying how animal intelligence could contribute to climate adaptation strategies. Her team's findings suggested that wildlife had far greater capacity for environmental problem-solving than previously believed, especially when different species worked together. The story became a powerful symbol of hope in the face of climate change. It showed that nature had incredible adaptive capacity when species worked together, sharing knowledge and resources to overcome challenges. The bear had demonstrated that intelligence and cooperation could create resilience even in the face of severe environmental changes. Communities near bear-influenced areas reported significant improvements in local ecosystem health. The animals' cooperative efforts were helping to maintain biodiversity, protect water sources, and preserve crucial habitat corridors. Their work was creating islands of resilience in a rapidly changing landscape. Marcus's original bear continued to amaze researchers with its innovative responses to new challenges. It had begun teaching younger animals how to create complex networks of food storage and water conservation, ensuring resources would be available during increasingly unpredictable seasons. The bear's influence had created a new understanding of how wildlife could adapt to environmental change. It showed that animals were capable of sophisticated problem-solving and long-term planning when faced with survival challenges. More importantly, it demonstrated that cooperation between species could create resilience that benefited entire ecosystems. As Marcus updated his photographic record of these developments, he reflected on how far the story had come. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had evolved into a powerful example of how nature could adapt and thrive in the face of unprecedented challenges. The bear had shown that intelligence, cooperation, and compassion were crucial tools for survival in a changing world. The bear's legacy now extended far beyond its original valley, inspiring new approaches to wildlife conservation and climate adaptation worldwide. It had created a model of resilience that combined intelligence, cooperation, and innovation in ways that continued to surprise and inspire both scientists and conservationists. This chapter in the ongoing story served as a powerful reminder that positive change often began with simple acts of compassion, growing and evolving in ways that could help entire ecosystems adapt and thrive in the face of even the most daunting challenges. 20 years after the initial rescue, Marcus noticed subtle changes in his old friend's behavior. The bear, now in its elder years, had begun spending more time teaching younger bears and other species, passing on its accumulated wisdom with an urgency that suggested it understood the importance of ensuring its legacy would continue. Dr. Rodriguez's team documented an extraordinary development. The bear had created what they called a wisdom council, gathering the most intelligent and cooperative animals from different species to share knowledge and learn from each other. This unprecedented behavior showed a level of foresight and planning that challenged all existing theories about animal cognition. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus witnessed a profound moment. The bear had assembled a group of young animals from various species: bear cubs, wolf pups, young moose, and even smaller creatures like foxes and ravens. With patience and deliberation, it demonstrated complex problem-solving techniques, showing them how to work together to overcome challenges they would face in the changing environment. Dr. Helena Martinez, a specialist in animal learning behaviors, arrived to study this remarkable teaching phenomenon. What we're observing here is beyond anything previously documented, she explained. The bear isn't just passing on survival skills. It's creating a curriculum of cooperation and environmental stewardship that will benefit multiple species for generations to come. The bear's methods showed sophisticated understanding of different learning styles. It would adapt its teaching approach based on each species' natural abilities and limitations, finding ways to communicate complex concepts across species barriers. This demonstrated an understanding of cognitive diversity that amazed even veteran researchers. A particularly touching example occurred when the bear began teaching young animals about healing and caregiving. It showed them how to identify medicinal plants, treat injuries, and support sick or injured members of their community. This knowledge transfer wasn't limited to their own species. They were learning to care for any creature in need. Marcus's documentation of these teaching sessions attracted worldwide attention. The footage showed young animals not just learning practical skills, but developing emotional intelligence and empathy. They were being taught to recognize signs of distress in other species and respond with appropriate help. The Bear's Valley had evolved into what researchers called a living university of wildlife cooperation. Different species would gather to share their unique knowledge and skills, creating a rich tapestry of shared wisdom that benefited the entire ecosystem. The bear served as both teacher and facilitator, ensuring that crucial knowledge was preserved and passed on. Dr. Rodriguez's team made a groundbreaking discovery about the bear's teaching methods. They observed that it wasn't just passing on information, it was teaching other animals how to teach. This meta-learning approach ensured that the knowledge would continue to spread even after the bear was gone. The story attracted the attention of educational experts worldwide. The bear's teaching methods offered insights into how different types of intelligence could work together, challenging traditional views about learning and cognition. Its approach to inclusive education became a model for understanding diverse learning needs. Young animals who had learned from the bear began showing remarkable abilities to adapt and innovate. They weren't just repeating what they had been taught. They were building upon it, developing new solutions to emerging challenges. The bear had created a legacy of creative problem-solving that continued to evolve. Local communities reported that the impact of the bear's teachings extended beyond the animal kingdom. Wildlife began showing unprecedented awareness of human activities, finding ways to coexist peacefully while maintaining healthy boundaries. The bear had created a model of cooperation that bridged the gap between wild and human worlds. Marcus worked with educators to develop programs that incorporated lessons from the bear's teaching methods. Schools began exploring how different learning styles could work together, inspired by the bear's ability to teach across species barriers. The story became a powerful tool for promoting inclusive education. The scientific community documented how the bear's teaching had created a new form of wildlife culture. Animals were passing on not just practical skills, but values of cooperation and mutual support. This cultural evolution was helping species adapt to environmental challenges more effectively than traditional competition-based behaviors. Dr. Martinez established a research program focused on studying how animal teaching methods could inform human education. Her findings suggested that the bear's inclusive, adaptive approach to teaching had valuable applications for understanding how different types of intelligence could work together effectively. The story became a symbol of hope for the future, of education and cooperation. It showed that intelligence came in many forms, and that the best learning happened when different types of knowledge and abilities were valued and shared. The bear had demonstrated that teaching was about more than just passing on information. It was about creating connections and understanding. Communities near the bear's territory reported that younger animals were taking on teaching roles of their own, spreading knowledge to new areas. The bear's educational legacy was creating a network of wildlife teachers, each adding their own insights and adaptations to the growing body of shared wisdom. Marcus's original bear continued to amaze researchers with its dedication to teaching. Even as its physical strength began to fade with age, its ability to communicate and inspire remained strong. It seemed to understand that its most important contribution would be the knowledge and values it passed on to future generations. The bear's influence had created a new understanding of how intelligence and learning could evolve in the natural world. It showed that teaching wasn't limited to human beings. It was a natural process that could emerge whenever beings recognized the value of sharing knowledge for the common good. As Marcus documented these developments, he reflected on how the simple act of freeing a trapped bear cub had led to such profound changes in our understanding of wildlife intelligence and education. The bear had shown that when knowledge was shared with compassion and purpose, it could create positive change that extended far beyond individual species or generations. The bear's legacy now included not just the physical changes it had created in its environment, but the educational revolution it had sparked throughout the wildlife community. It had created a model of teaching and learning that combined intelligence, cooperation, and compassion in ways that continued to inspire and amaze both scientists and educators worldwide. This chapter in the ongoing story served as a powerful reminder that every being had the potential to be both teacher and student, and that true wisdom emerged when different forms of intelligence worked together for the common good. The bear had shown that education was about more than survival. It was about creating connections that could transform entire communities. 25 years after that fateful winter morning when Marcus first saved the bear cub, he stood in the valley that had become a living testament to the power of compassion. The morning sun painted the landscape in soft golden hues, illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. A thriving ecosystem where different species coexisted in harmony, all shaped by the wisdom of one remarkable bear. The bear, now in its twilight years, had slowed considerably, but maintained the same intelligent awareness in its eyes that had captured Marcus's heart so many years ago. Its fur had grayed around the muzzle, and the scar on its leg had faded to a silver line, but its presence still commanded respect and admiration from all who encountered it. Dr. Rodriguez and her team had gathered for what they sensed would be a significant moment. The bear had been exhibiting behavior that suggested it was preparing for a final transition. But rather than retreat in solitude, as most aging bears would, it was orchestrating something extraordinary, a formal passing of leadership to the next generation. Over several days, the research team witnessed an unprecedented ceremony of succession. The bear gathered its most accomplished students, bears, wolves, and other species that had learned its methods of cooperation and problem-solving. Through a series of demonstrations and interactions, it seemed to be formally transferring responsibilities to this diverse council of wildlife leaders. Young animals that had grown up under the bear's guidance showed remarkable sophistication in carrying on its legacy. They had internalized not just the practical skills it had taught them, but the deeper wisdom about the importance of cooperation and mutual support. The bear had created something that would outlive it, a new way of being that challenged everything we thought we knew about wildlife behavior. Marcus captured these poignant moments through his lens, his hands trembling slightly as he documented what felt like the closing chapter of an extraordinary story. Yet in many ways, it was also a beginning. The bear's influence had created a self-sustaining system of cooperation and learning that would continue to evolve long after it was gone. Dr. Elena Martinez, who had been studying the bear's teaching methods for years, observed something remarkable during these final lessons. "It's not just passing on knowledge," she noted. "It's transferring a vision of what's possible when different species work together. This bear has fundamentally changed how we understand wildlife intelligence and social organization." The bear's final teachings focused on the importance of maintaining the delicate balance it had helped create. It showed its successors how to protect the valley's water systems, maintain the network of safe passages between territories, and ensure that knowledge continued to be shared across species barriers. Each demonstration was delivered with a patience and clarity that seemed to acknowledge the historical significance of these moments. Local indigenous elders were invited to witness these transitions. They recognized in the bear's behavior ancient wisdom about the interconnectedness of all living things, seeing in its legacy a bridge between traditional knowledge and modern scientific understanding. The bear had demonstrated truths about nature that their ancestors had always known, that cooperation was as natural as competition, and that intelligence flourished when different beings worked together. As the days passed, the bear began spending more time observing than teaching, watching with apparent satisfaction as its students took on leadership roles. The various species it had mentored showed remarkable ability to work together, solving problems and maintaining the harmony of the valley without its direct guidance. Marcus noticed that the bear had begun making regular visits to significant places throughout its territory. The spot where it had first been trapped as a cub, the clearing where it had later guided him to photograph rare wildlife behaviors, the caves where it had sheltered multiple species during natural disasters. It seemed to be making a final journey through the landscape it had transformed, The research team documented how different species responded to this transition. Animals that would naturally avoid each other were now working together to maintain the systems the bear had created. They had developed their own methods of communication and cooperation, building upon the foundation the bear had established. One particularly moving moment came when a group of young bears, wolves and moose worked together to create a new water conservation system without any direct guidance. They combined their different strengths and abilities in ways that showed they had fully embraced the bear's teachings about cooperation and mutual support. Dr. Rodriguez's team observed that the bear's influence had created lasting changes in animal behavior across multiple generations. Young animals born into this cooperative system showed natural inclination toward collaboration rather than competition. The bear had literally changed the evolutionary trajectory of multiple species. The scientific community began preparations to document and preserve the bear's legacy. Researchers from around the world gathered to study how its teachings could be applied to wildlife conservation and ecosystem management. The bear had created a living model of how different species could adapt and thrive together in the face of environmental challenges. Marcus spent long hours with the bear during these final days, their connection as strong as ever. Though no words passed between them, their shared history spoke volumes. The bear would often meet his gaze with an expression that seemed to convey both gratitude for that long-ago rescue and satisfaction at how far its influence had spread. The bear's final lesson came in how it approached its own transition. Rather than fighting against the natural cycle of life, it demonstrated acceptance and grace, showing its successors that change was a natural part of the greater pattern. Its calm acceptance helped prepare the community for the coming transition. 1. Clear autumn morning. Much like the day when Marcus had first found it trapped, the bear made its way to a peaceful meadow overlooking the valley. Surrounded by the community it had created, it laid down for what would be the last time. The gathering of animals that accompanied it, bears, wolves, moose, and countless smaller species, maintained a respectful vigil that demonstrated the depth of connection it had fostered. Marcus's photographs of these final days became powerful testimonies to the bear's legacy. They showed not just the end of one remarkable life, but the continuation of its influence through the countless beings it had touched. The bear had created something that would continue to grow and evolve, inspiring new generations to build upon its foundation of cooperation and mutual understanding. The story of Marcus and the bear became more than just a tale of friendship between a man and a wild animal. It became a testament to the transformative power of compassion, showing how a single act of kindness could grow into something that changed the world in profound and lasting ways. The bear's legacy lived on in the thriving ecosystem it had created. In the new understanding of wildlife intelligence it had inspired, and in the countless beings who continued to build upon its vision of cooperation and mutual support. As the sun set on this chapter of the story, the valley remained a living monument to what was possible when beings chose cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, and love over indifference. The bear had shown that the capacity for positive change existed in all living things, It just needed the right catalyst to emerge. Its legacy would continue to inspire and guide future generations, reminding them that the greatest changes often began with the simplest acts of compassion. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.